Why were you ashamed of yourself like never before? When I was 18, I started stealing money out of the register at the mom and pop store where I worked. I can't even tell you why I did it. I had never stolen even a candy bar before, but I started stealing large amounts of cash by falsifying refunds on the register. It went on for about a year, and then one day I was called into the office where two detectives were waiting. I had stolen over $17,000 in a year. That wasn't the shameful part. The shameful part was telling my dad that I was being charged with 7 felonies, but that if he paid the grocery store back they would drop all charges. I don't know how he ever forgave me for this. He is the most honorable person I know, and the look of disgust on his face when I told him has stuck with me forever. And of course he paid them back for me. I am 31 now and have mostly paid him back, but it is still something that makes me really upset. I don't think I've ever forgiven myself for being so stupid. I was never the most patient person, and I despise being late for things. My wife, kids and I were going to walk down and hang out at a neighbor's house for the evening. They were taking forever and my wife kept stalling and we were going to be late. I yelled at all of them to hurry up and proceeded to be pissed off the whole walk down. When we walked in, it was a surprise party for me. She was delaying because they hadn't finished the decorations yet. Felt like a complete piece of shit. This was 10 years ago and it still bothers me. Definitely taught me to be a more patient person though. When I was 19, I fell for one of those fake check scams. My mom had to help me pay the bank $2,500. I've since paid her back, but I was so ashamed of myself. I had never broken down and sobbed so hard in front of someone. My grandmother was my favorite person in the world. Since I was a baby. She sent one real pearl at Christmas. When I was in my early 20s. She made them into a real pearl necklace. She passed away not too long after that. A few years later, I went to a school competition and lost that necklace. I still feel physically ill when I think about it. ETA. Y'all. Thank you. So many supportive comments. To those of you who have had the same experience. Big hugs to you. When I was growing up, I lived in a hoarder house. The yucky animal poop kind. I was a kid. I had no control over my environment, so I just had to keep a low profile to not draw attention of CPS. We were on government assistance and all that. A few instances come to mind. In high school I was a lunch ticket kid. Meaning I was on a program where I got free school lunches. On Mondays before first period, I'd go to the cafeteria to collect my week's worth of lunch tickets. It was always the same lunch lady who passed them out. One day, totally randomly, she passes me my tickets and says something to the effect that I was a leech and mooch on the system. Griping how she works for her food. And I should too? It was so weird and random I just didn't think to fight her on it. She was a grown-up. So she must be right. Right? Second thing also happened in high school. I got called to the guidance office. And my guidance counselor handed me smoking cessation brochures and said if I wanted help quitting smoking, she could help. Thing is, I didn't smoke. At all. It actually grossed me out. And it still does to this day. My mom smoked in the house and I guess I stunk so bad of cigarettes that someone filed a complaint to the school about me. If it's any consolation, I'm now an honest middle-class taxpayer. Please no hate. When I was a little kid, probably first grade or so, I remember being super mad at my mom for something. That day, I was using a coffee can to trace for circles. I would then use the circles to make faces. Then I would color in the faces. I did them for my dad and my siblings and my teacher. Then I did one for my mom. And when I was showing her, I took a red crayon and drew a big X across her face on the page. I was angry. I don't even remember why. But I will never forget the look on her face. It was like I destroyed her soul. She was just so defeated and sad. Not like a play sad. Like real sadness. Looking back at it with adult eyes. I am sure she was frustrated being a mom of multiple kids. On a one-income household. And there is no telling what was going on in her marriage at the time. Plus that was about the time she lost her father. So I know it was a difficult time in her life and that she didn't need that kind of bullshit from me. So when I drew that X, I think I actually hurt her in some way. That was almost 40 years ago and it still makes me ashamed to think about it. It's funny how certain memories from your early childhood are burned into your brain and rest just disappear. Few years back went to visit my sister. At the time I reached at her home I had to pee really bad. I was so full I was walking funny. My sister, her husband and his mother came to greet me at the door. I said I need to use the toilet immediately and we all entered the house. Just then my little niece rushed from inside and hugged me. Her head hit my lower abdomen really hard and I peed right there. I did stop as quickly as possible but I had a big wet patch on my pant. I mean, nobody wants to admit they ate 9 cans of ravioli. But I did. I'm ashamed of myself. The first can doesn't count. Then you get to the second and third. Fourth and fifth I think I burnt with the blowtorch. And then I just kept eating. I did a bunch of drugs and drank a lot when I was younger. I ended up in the hospital as a result. I remember having to explain to the doctor all the drugs I took. How often. How much I drank. I knew he'd probably heard it all before and was just trying to understand my condition. I sincerely doubt he was judging me too harshly. Or maybe he was. Who knows? Regardless. I just remember feeling immense shame when I was explaining that I basically hadn't given a fuck about myself for the last 13-ish years. That was a lonely place. Went to the bank and the lady who was helping me told me about a savings account I could set up and the benefits of it. Didn't really care about it, but she seemed nice so I thought yeah sure why not. She wanted to show how easy it was to do so she asked to use my phone and do it and I said sure. I just held my phone flat on my palm facing towards her while she went on Safari and then boom. Ebony wants it in all 3 holes with thumbnail big as fuck on the screen because I forgot to switch from private to normal. She created a new tab really fast and done what she intended to do and we both acted like she didn't see what she saw, but I died inside and couldn't stop thinking about it for the following days. Back in elementary school. My class, including me. I won't play victim here, made fun of the nice teacher so much that he started crying. I've never felt so ashamed of myself until that moment. I still feel like shit up to this day. I've never seen him again after elementary school. So I never had the chance to say sorry. 22 years ago a friend trusted me and told she has epilepsy and the medication made her gain weight. I was only one outside family she shared with in 8 years. And as a silly teenager I disclosed her secret to my that time crush who made it public info. I felt so small and ashamed of myself. Still ashamed of myself though she forgave me for it, which made the guilt worse. I had the flu with a crazy fever and went to Target to pick up cold medicine and Gatorade and discovered that I was talking to myself when the lady in line in front of me turned around and looked at me horrified. I have no idea what I said. But she grabbed her as yet unloaded cart and skedaddled off to another register. There was a guy behind me in line and refused to tell me what I must have said. Just laughed at me the whole time he was in line. When I was 17 I drove home from a friend's house one evening and parked in our attached garage. I had not been drinking. But being a scatterbrain, I forgot the keys in the ignition and the car was on. It ran all night, pumping carbon monoxide into the house where I lived alone with my mom. In the morning my mom woke me up in a frenzy saying we had to get out of the house. She'd been looking forward to a breakfast with her friends but had to have one of them drive us to the hospital instead. We had to get put on oxygen. My mom for much longer than I because her bedroom was closer to the garage so she inhaled more carbon monoxide. Nurses asked me if it was a suicide attempt. And when I insisted it wasn't they didn't believe me. The look in their eyes as they saw me and thought I tried to murder suicide my mom still haunts me. I was so ashamed and wished I could actually kill myself for being so stupid. When I was 12 or 13 I used to steal money from my grandma. I used to take advantage of the fact she was old and not very mobile and take money from her purse or from an envelope she kept in her wardrobe. Not huge amounts of money. Perhaps £150 in total spread across a couple of years. She was the loveliest, kindest person I've ever met and I never heard her say a bad word about anyone or complain when she was in poor health. The worst part is I think that perhaps she knew but wouldn't have said anything as she wouldn't have wanted to get me in trouble. She passed over 20 years ago. I was with her when she went. I'm 47 now but still think about it often and am so ashamed of it. I DoorDashed myself 4 sets of Twinkies from the gas station down the street. After my father passed, it hit me how little time I had spent with him. I'll never get that time back. And if I allow myself to think about it too much, it rips me to shreds. I loved him so much. But I was fresh out of the house and living with my boyfriend and trying to be an adult. My father was battling cancer. And I could have gone to visit him so many times. But I didn't. If I could go back in time and scream in my own face to sit with him every day, I'd do it in a heartbeat. He deserved so much better. The 25th of June was the 7th anniversary of his death. This time of year always hurts extra. Always make time for the people you love. You're not guaranteed tomorrow. And regret is a potent poison. I, male, once failed to control a mediocre fart mid-conversation with a female coworker friend when she was talking. I heard her small stumble mid-sentence. She recovered well. I blushed like a baby and had troubles talking forward. But she recovered our conversation. She did it flawlessly. Chad conversation piloting skills. 10 out of 10. But now when I see her I sometimes mentally facepalm myself. Everything I had planned 7 years ago. Everything I could ever hope to achieve by now. Not a single one of it happened. I'm so disappointed and ashamed of myself for being incapable. I feel like I just wasted my prime doing nothing but overthink. The anxiety, embarrassment, disappointment, and pressure are weighing on me too much. I can't bring any confidence in me anymore. Blaming COVID was just an excuse. A means of escape. I'll probably end up in the exact same shit RN even if it didn't happen. This happened in like 2nd grade and it still haunts me lol. I can't remember the exact conversation. But I boastfully informed my friend that I had basically been at a concert because my mom was at one while pregnant with me. Later found out this isn't even true. It was actually while pregnant with my brother. Anyway, my friend was like, "Oh yeah? What concert?" I panicked because I had absolutely no idea. And blurted out the first name that came to mind, James Bond. She gave me a weird look. And changed the topic. I later found out who. Or what James Bond even is. I have no idea why I thought he was a musician. And proceeded to wish my mother had never been pregnant with me at all. Has this friend completely forgotten about this exchange years ago? No doubt. Do I still occasionally think about it while lying awake at night? Yes, happy crying face. It's an ongoing shame. I put myself in serious debt over the past couple years. While I do pay everything on time, I can't get approved anywhere to help put my debt into a lump sum. I recently picked up a car payment as well for my mother as my grandfather was paying it for her. But he recently passed. It's a struggle. So when I finally do pay everything off I will most likely cry tears of joy. Bubble guts during a road trip. Had to pull over and poop in the bushes. People were driving by and saw me. I will never recover from that embarrassment. Edit. Sounds like a lot of you share the same experience I did. My time to shine. Last year, I was hospitalized for about 3 weeks. I was in the ICU for about a week at the start. When I initially woke up I realized I had a catheter in me. And every time I woke up after sleep, a slight morning would happen. And it was pretty uncomfortable. But it would go away quickly. For a while at the hospital, I was suppressing a lot of intrusive thoughts because of the feeling of a boner with a catheter was very displeasing. I had one of the nicest, most caring nurses. And it didn't help that she was roughly my age, early 20s. Out of respect that she was caring for me, helping me poop, get my phone, could not move my arms whatsoever. I refused to have any thoughts about her. Because I respected her and thought of her as a friend because she would talk to me when I was lonely and depressed. Fast forward. I had the catheter finally removed. It has been like 2 weeks and a half. And my dick felt like it was going to explode. Every morning felt like I was on the verge of a wet dream. I had just started to learn how to walk again. And had some function of my arms. I had the biggest boner ever. So I decided I'll walk to the bathroom and have a wank and finally get this over with. I go in there. Barely able to stand. I start. And I realize that something's wrong. For some reason it's difficult keeping my dick hard. So I keep at it. Until I start getting dizzy. I realized I was about to faint because my body needed the blood that was going to my dick to regulate the blood pressure for me to stand. Because I was still early in my physio. As I'm about to faint, I managed to hit the emergency call button for the bathroom. And cover myself back in my hospital gown. Some random nurse found me passed out on the ground. Next thing I remember was waking up in a chair with like 5 nurses making sure I was okay. Told them I wanted to poop. And since I knew how to walk again I tried giving it a shot on my own. God. I have been wanting to tell this story to someone for so long. I was so ashamed, but it's also funny. Also now have a thing for nurses. I spent a year and a half working as a freight broker, and I was constantly horrifically ashamed of myself due to the nature of the job. If you don't know, freight brokers act as a middleman between shippers and truckers. So you tell me you need a load sent from Albany to Albuquerque, I tell you I can do it for $4,500, and I pay a trucker to do it for $4,000. Truckers hated us, but most of that was unjustified. We offered a legitimate service, as shippers won't just give the load to every Vlad or Igor in their truck. What made the job so awful for me is I'm a people pleaser to the extreme. I cannot let people down or fail people because it literally eats at my soul. 50% of the job was lying to a shipper I've just let down because of things that were completely out of my control. I hated it. I went in every day hoping a truck would crush my car. I am in a far better place now. I have anxiety and depression. Everything makes me ashamed like never before. Was on opiates, heroin in late teens to mid-20s. Life is better now. 12 years without that shit this August. I was 19. Living on my own and making $8.50 hours. Life was hard. I stole some old computer memory from the place I was working and sold it. Made about $300. 100K SQFT warehouse full of computer stuff. They had probably written it off and it would have ended up trash. I rationalized the hell out of it. That was a lot of years ago. But I still feel like complete shit about it. I've only ever told one other person what I did. So I have a twin sister who is autistic. Growing up, it was hard for me to understand why she was so different and was given extra attention. In 5th grade, 10 years old, I had a couple of friends I sat with at lunch. At our school, each class sat in one assigned row of tables. The special needs class sat at the end table of one of these rows. The row right next to mine. IDK how or why it started, but we would sit there and make fun of her. Watching her and giggling amongst ourselves if she did something weird. One thing we found weird was how she would lean against one of the teacher's aides and have him like side hug her. We never went up to her directly. We would do it from our table like a bunch of cowards. This went on for a while until the three of us got called into an empty classroom by the vice principal. Apparently we weren't so subtle cause, somehow, my sister could tell that we were teasing her. And about her having the teacher's aide hug her. Apparently she was doing this because she felt so bad from our bullying that she needed the comfort. The vice principal spent a good while scolding us before telling the two other girls to go, leaving only me. I'll never forget how she bent down, got in my face, and said, "That's your sister. How could you do something like that to your own sister?" I just remember 10-year-old me staring down at the ground in shame. Unable to even say anything. It was honestly a big turning point for me. I not only swore to never treat my sister like that again, but I also made sure that nobody else teased or made fun of her. After college, I got an apartment with a couple of friends. Shortly thereafter, another friend was looking for people to adopt kittens from a litter they had. With my roommate's blessings, I got a cat. His name was Puck, and he was awesome. About 6 months later, my roommate also ended up with an opportunity to adopt a kitten from a different litter. And he decided he would do so. And thus, Todorbert entered our lives. He was precocious, energetic, and an avid explorer. Within a few days, my roommate found out from his new job that he would be required to travel across the country for 3 weeks for special job training. He was surprised and worried about what to do with his new kitten. I told him I'd just look after both cats until he got back. No worries. For the next couple of weeks it was me, Puck, and Todorbert. We had a good time and the cats got along surprisingly well. One day, it was time for Puck's follow-up with the vet. That morning, I also noticed Todorbert curled up on the bathroom floor. Unusually lethargic. I gave him some food but he ate very little. I attempted to entice him to play. Never difficult for a kitten. But he just meowed quietly and stayed in the bathroom. I got things together to take Puck to the vet and went back to check on Todorbert. He was now curled up in the bathroom sink basin. Something was clearly wrong. I called my roommate and told him I was taking both cats to the vet. He agreed. Upon arrival, the vet set Puck aside to see what was ailing poor little Todorbert. What was a mystery to me was obvious to her. Renal failure is sadly common among kittens. and can be purely congenital. She told me that his only hope was emergency dialysis at the nearby university. I called my roommate to give him the bad news. After a short discussion where we were both stunned, it was clear he couldn't afford the treatment. I got off the phone and interrupted the vet, who was already rushing to prep Todorbert for transport to the university. It wasn't going to happen. I was in a daze. Somehow totally unprepared for such serious circumstances. The vet was understanding, and informed me of what I already knew. The next most humane option was euthanization. I agreed, knowing my roommate was aware of the situation. Then she asked the obvious question that I was equally unprepared for. Would I like to stay with Todorbert while they put him down? As I said, I was in a daze. When I heard the question, the only part one could process was, would I like to? No, I would not like to. I told her no thank you. She apologized for the circumstances. And I collected Puck, with a clean bill of health, and drove him home. I have no memory of the trip. I only remember getting inside the apartment, letting Puck out of his carrier, sitting on the couch, and crying. Moments later, her question entered my brain and I heard it properly for the first time. Would I like to stay with Todorbert while they put him down? Holy shit. Of course I would. He deserves, at the very least, that small comfort from me. I called the vet to ask if I could come back, and she sadly informed me that they'd already performed the procedure. I thanked her and hung up. I spent about 3 weeks in total with that kitten. That was about 20 years ago. I still tear up every time I think about how I wasn't with him at the end. When Puck's time came years later, I was there for every bittersweet moment. Sorry Todorbert. You deserved more. Trigger warning. Sexual abuse. When I was being groomed by my grandfather, it took me years to be able to look myself in the mirror and again. It started with me trying to sell nudes online to make enough money to move out of his house. His wife was incredibly emotionally, verbally, and mentally abusive, and my grandpa was the only one who was nice to me, so I trusted him with a lot. He was also super open about sex, sexuality, and supportive of sex work, and I made the mistake of trusting him when I had someone ask to mail me something. All of our mail came through his shop. He worked on radios, so I had to tell him if I was expecting a package. When he found out that I was selling nudes out of desperation to move out instead of offering any kind of help, he blackmailed me. He told me he would tell my grandmother if I didn't send him copies of my photos. This escalated to the point of making me model lingerie for him that he would buy me and making me sleep in his bed after his son died because he was sad and scared to be alone. One time I woke up to his hands inside my shirt groping my breasts, and I just wiggles away from him and tried to go back to sleep. The next morning he told me all about the super realistic dream he had about groping me. I still struggle with feelings of guilt and shame and have days where I can't even bear to look in the mirror. Edit. Added a trigger warning. I realized my dad had been standing in the doorway watching me dramatically shadowbox to tub thumping on the radio in my bedroom when I was in 4th or 5th grade. Getting knocked down. Getting up again. The whole deal. My dad's a caring person and there was no reason to be so embarrassed. But I remember feeling wicked fucking stupid. So, to set the stage, I was a late bloomer. I was the tubby guy in class. The one who wore hiking boots and cargo shorts. And who played Battletech on the weekends instead of going to parties. I never went to prom, junior or otherwise. I'm pretty sure I stayed in reading Dragonlance that night. I never went on a date until college. But none of that is what I'm ashamed of. I did bloom. Eventually, I unneckbearded myself, went to law school, got in shape, and then got married to my very first girlfriend. For a while, I was a normal person living a pretty great life. And then she died in my early 30s. And I was a young widower. Flash forward a bit, and I was ready to date again. Or, really, since my only experience was her, I was ready to date around for the very first time. And, what do you know? It turns out that childless, relatively fit lawyers in their early 30s are a hot commodity. And for the very first time in my life I was being actively pursued by multiple women. So I dated them. All of them. At one point, I was actively sleeping with 3 women in the same week. To my benefit, I was not technically cheating. No one of these relationships were exclusive. They were all in the early stages of online dating where you still assume the other person is keeping their profile open and possibly seeing other people on the side. But there is a point where, Even if you haven't had the exclusivity talk yet. It's 3-4 weeks in and you sort of get the vibe that she wants to. And has maybe even stopped using the app. My shame and regret is that I let it get to that point with all three simultaneously. I had never been desired before, not like this. And I couldn't let go. None of them were my girlfriend. And none of them had broached the topic of exclusivity. But all three of them were actively trying to spend weekends with me. And asking me what we were going to do on my birthday that was coming up. I did cut things off with two of them immediately thereafter. But I still feel guilty about effectively stringing them along for a week or two longer than was appropriate. I wouldn't have wanted that done to me. I genuinely wish I could turn back the clock and not have hurt them as badly. The sex was great, though. Some backstory: my mom and my bio dad are divorced. My mom worked heavy shift work at a car factory, so I was never at home as a child. I'd live with multiple other families, couples, and then my mom would come see me for my 30-minute lunchtime at school. On the weekends, I was at my dad's house. I was abused by some of the families, but that's not what this is about right now. So when my half-brother was born, I was 11. My mom and my stepdad, who both worked the same rotating shifts at the factory, decided it would be best that after my mom's 1-year maternity leave was up, they would work on opposite shifts so my half-brother would always have a parent at home and he wouldn't have to be raised like I was. I hated him for that, and I was extremely jealous of the fact that not only did he have both biological parents, he was also able to stay home, and the only time he was passed off to someone else was when he went to evening, after school daycare for an hour or so, because I was too young to look after him. My mom or my stepdad would pick him up on their way home from work. I hate that I hated a baby, toddler for having a better life than me. When it's not his fault I was raised the way I was or treated the way I was. Me and my brother, 12 years old now, are super close now even though I'm in my mid-20s. I'll never tell him what I thought of him when I was little. When I was 10 or 11 I shot dead a completely innocent bird with a soft air gun, and that is something I thought I and my then friend would never speak of again. Which I haven't, till now. This shame will never pass. And I deserve that. About 20 years ago, I attended a party at a coworker's house that consisted of friends and coworkers alike. I was newly promoted to supervisor of one of the teams at our company. And a lot of the coworkers at the party were my subordinates. Throughout the evening, my coworkers kept toasting me and giving me shots of tequila. As the evening progressed, my level of intoxication went from "wow, this is fun" to paint the bathroom with vomit in pretty quick order. Also, throughout the evening, the people who were my friends at the party decided they were leaving and decided I was too drunk to come with them, and before I knew it, the party was winding down and I was one of few people left. Here's where things get foggy for me. I had never been this drunk before. Not even close. I remember that I was upset that I got abandoned in my current state by my friends. I remember that I was embarrassed because I vomited in their bathroom more than once. And I remember that I didn't want to drive. But no one would take me home. Here is the part one I'm ashamed of. I decided to drive home. Shame doesn't begin to describe how I feel about this decision. I was blackout drunk. I was still vomiting almost uncontrollably. I was at a party in town I was not familiar with. And I had a car with a manual transmission that I was very new to driving. I learned how to drive stick with this car and only had it for about 4 months by this time. I got into my car, barely able to drive it under normal circumstances, and had to figure out how to get home. Over 30 minutes away. Things remain foggy. I remember leaving the party. I remember pulling over in the median of a 4-lane divided road and vomiting. And someone pulling over behind me and asking if I was okay. And that's it. I don't remember anything else at all. The next memory I have is waking up the next day in my apartment. In my bed. Fully clothed and hungover, worse than I ever have been before. With no clue as to how I got there. My roommates, the friends who left me at the party the night before, weren't there. And as far as I could tell, they never came home that night. As I got up and checked around, my car was in the parking lot out front. Fully intact and vomit-free. I was uninjured. Aside from the worst hangover I've ever had. But I was filled with the most shame I have ever had. Or will have in my entire life. I never should have gotten behind the wheel of my car. I am lucky that I got home safely. Even though I'm not sure how I got there. I could have hurt myself or someone else. That evening left me shame that I will never let myself forget and that I never will allow myself to feel again. A shame that I used to keep myself sober for the last 20 years. I know that many things happened along the way where others should have stopped me. Or helped me. Something else I will never forget about the people involved. But I have come to accept responsibility alone for my actions. I still got into the car and left the party. Even though I shouldn't have. I didn't ask for help. When it was clear that I should have. TLDR. Got blackout drunk at a party and tried to drive myself home. Luckily didn't kill anybody. Somehow made it home even though I have no idea how. Probably had a stranger, Good Samaritan drive me and my car to my apartment and leave me there. I had been eating sometimes as many as 10 or 15 10 milligrams Vicodin a day for a few years when the guy the first got them from couldn't get any more. I tried as hard as I could to just ride it out for a few weeks. But the withdrawals were so bad I can't even put it in words to properly describe just how terrible I felt. I laid in bed kicking my legs uncontrollably. Non-stop. With little to no sleep or food for about 3 days and nights before I finally caved and went to the emergency room. The nurse walked in as I there. Kicking, sweating, and tossing and turning uncontrollably. She asked me what brought me in. And I broke down sobbing. Then explained that I was in severe opioid withdrawal. I was expecting her to judge me harshly or be cruel about it. But when her eyes teared up and she assured me that she was going to make me feel better, I cried even harder. I was so embarrassed and ashamed for everything. For what I had done to my brother and sister-in-law. For how I had ignored my wife's pleas for me to stop. And for how I had let myself get into the situation in the first place. They gave me a few tabs of Suboxone and a follow-up appointment to get into a president program. I am a very lucky man for many reasons. But the biggest one is that my wife stayed by my side through all of that. This all happened before we were married, so she could have walked away any time, but she didn't. We've now been married for over 5 years, together for 14. She's a stay-at-home mom and I have a really good job in the trades. I have been clean ever since getting off of Suboxone 2 years ago. I was in high school and had a class where the teacher had us pair up for assignments and I didn't know anyone in the class. I remember cold sweat pouring down my neck and I panicked and wondered what I'd do when everyone else went with their friends. I was a teacher for a while and when I had them do group stuff I always assigned the groups in different random ways so no one had to go through that. I was watching my nephew one day. He was probably 4 or 5. And we were playing in the living room. We were fighting. And he had a toy shotgun that he was pretending to shoot at me with. He shot me and I fell on the floor and pretended to be dead. And he hit me in the face with this toy shotgun. I got mad and yelled at him. Took the shotgun away and put it in another room. When I came back into the living room he was still sitting on the floor crying. He was too young to really know better. And I think more than anything I hurt his feelings when I yelled at him. I still think about that sometimes. And every time I do I still feel like absolute shit. That was like 10 or 12 years ago. Currently sort of ashamed of myself. I just can't seem to bring myself to go on dating sites. Mostly low self-esteem and body image. Despite the fact I'm incredibly lonely. I've created a problem for myself and refuse to solve it. I need help but I don't know what form would be best. I have bad anxiety and depression and things have been tough with my S.O. And instead of seeing her in a moment and being there for her I decided to leave for the night, but ultimately came back 30 minutes later which made her feel like I abandoned her. I assumed she wanted complete space when really she wanted me. I was too panicked, completely overwhelmed and breaking emotionally during the argument to see it at the time. I probably fucked it beyond repair. Puking while shitting myself outside Paris CDG airport because of food poisoning was a low point in my life. NGL. When I was 17 my dad bought tickets to go see Elton John with me and my brother. We both just flat refused to go. Even though we had absolutely nothing else going on. It's been 30 years and I can still hear him say you won't go with me? In my head and I fucking hate it so much that I was so selfish in that moment. It took me years to really grasp it and I have just been completely ashamed by it ever since. I have ADHD. Depression. And I'm a failure at mostly everything. I ripped up a poem my spouse wrote in anger. My alcoholism. It debilitated me. It ruined friendships. My health. My self-worth. My ability to live a normal life. I hated every single second of it when I wasn't ass over tea kettle drunk. Even then I hated it, but it was more tolerable because I was too drunk to give a shit about it. Fast forward to now. Been sober since August 13, 2021. Spent 97 days in a rehab facility. Took back my life. Got a job working third shift. Being dependable every day. I've gained the respect and trust of my father and mother and close friends all over again. I just went to a wedding almost a month ago and had so much fun being the one sober person there. I still have a lot of things to work on, but goddamn I am doing so much better than I was. And I can't look back and let the past ruin what I have now. I can't regain all I lost, but I can at least forge forward and make the best of what I have. Recently came to the realization that I have not been good to or for any of the women in my life. Not in an abusive or physically hurtful way, but in how I've treated them and taken them for granted. I've never been fully present or supportive of any of them. And I've never been honest about my feelings with anyone. I'm a 33-year-old man and only just now starting to emotionally develop. I'm completely clueless, scared out of my mind, and completely alone in the coming endeavors. And I really have no one but myself to blame for it. My mom died about 2 years ago. When I went through her stuff to see what to keep and what to throw away, I found various divorce papers. One of them detailing how both my parents blamed the other for my autism. Neither of them ever mentioned anything about this over the course of the divorce, of course, and have always affirmed they loved me. But I've always felt somewhat ashamed of my autism and wished that my parents had gotten a normal kid, and reading that they blamed each other just filled me with shame for just existing. It was usually an action taken during an angry outburst. Now that I'm older, I try to just brush things off. But when I do get angry, I try to remember that I can make it much worse. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.